is number 5 up for your webassign that's due next week. These are easy. Like, they're not going to take you a long time to do because they're look and sees. So they give you 2 graphs, and they ask you to evaluate the limit if it exists. We've done a little bit of this in class with Excel because for me, I like to see the picture so I can see more out of the graph in the first place. So I already showed you this in real problems. We've looked at the graph first, and then we went to webassign. And I'm like, if you want the answer, why don't you go look at it on the graph first? And you see it's leveling off here, or here's the behavior it's doing. I actually put my cursor on Excel so I could see the answer. So that's what, they're going backwards now. They're showing you the graph and asking you what the answer is. Easy peasy, man, we've already done it. So here we look at the left, and we say, where is that y value headed as x gets close to 2. I think they asked that 2. So as x gets close to 2, the y value is headed to 2. I can see that from the units here. This was 1 and this was 2. So the y values are closing in at 2. There's a point down here, but that doesn't matter. The y values are still in both sides heading to each other, which is 2. The actual value is different, but they're still heading to the same place. So I just draw little arrows and see if the y values are heading to the same place. So that point's irrelevant. So the limit exists, and it is 2. This one, the y value heads to 1. If I go my arrow this way, put my arrow this way, the y value heads to 1, right? But on the other side, the y value heads to 2. They're not the same. They've got to be the same for the limit to exist. They don't match. So that one, the limit does not exist. And let's go see what the computer wanted or webassign wanted. This is one of those where we probably should see what it wants. Okay, so I want you to answer some questions. So for this one, for example, it wants the limit as x approaches 2 for f of x plus g of x. And they got 2, but they don't, it's not quite right. I wonder if there's a little minus sign here. Because the limit, 2. So here at 2, this is 2. The y value at 2 is 0. This is x equals 2. That's why it was messing up. The limit as x approaches 2 for the first graph, we already figured that out. That's 2. Correct? The limit as x approaches 2 for the second graph, well, here's x equals 2. There's no gap there. There's no problem there. I just go to the graph. That's y equals 0. So at x equals 2, y equals 0. So I put 2 plus 0 is 2. That's where that comes from. X approaches 1 of the sum. Well, that does not exist. I just did that in my work. I showed you that right at 1, there's a problem. The limit from the right doesn't equal the limit from the left, so it doesn't exist. So I can add anything I wanted to it. It's still not going to exist. So this is why this is a does not exist. The limit as x approaches 0 of f of x times g of x. Well, that means my microscope or my magnifying glass is right at 0. So look at 0. That's right here. What is this one at 0? 0. 0 times anything is? Done. I told you these are not grind out, 10 complete the squares. That's like I think that people think that that's what I do. I just go to my office and sit around and complete the square, but that would be a nightmare. So they have a few more like this. F of x divided by g of x as x approaches -1. Well, you go back to the graph and say we're at -1. -1 is right here. Put the magnifying glass on. The y value is going to be -1. Hold that in your head. -1 for the first one. And the second one, it's going to be 0, right? So what do we get down here? Does not exist because I'm dividing by 0. That's why it does not exist. And the third one, x cubed. The limit as x approaches 2 of x cubed times f of x. I think I already did the 2. No, I didn't do the 2. Yeah, I did. 2 is 1, right? We already did that. X cubed is, if I plug 2 in, what do I get? What is 2 cubed? 2 times 8, right? So 8, and f of x at 2 was also 2, so 2 times 8 is 16. I see some nods. Is that sitting? I mean, these are not hard problems. They're weird problems, though. So the last time I used webassign in a class was years ago, and it was clunky back then, clunkier than it is now, believe it or not. And I think professors were complaining, and they were taking feedback from the professors. So one thing they wanted is to see steps, and another thing is they wanted more interesting problems. So it's really easy to ask Math 100 type problems in here. Factor it, show me what you get. Complete the square, show me what you get. But they're like, no, calculus is supposed to be interesting. So they give us some interesting problems. That's why we do in-class assignments in here, though. If I want to ask you interesting things, I want to see like you're getting it. So I'm not a fan. Last one. X approaches 1 for f of x. We already knew the answer to that one, right? It wasn't it? X approaches 1 is right here. F of x was 1. I just go to the y value right at the location I'm interested in. 3 plus 1 is 4. Square root of 4 is 2. So I get it. I get why they're asking. Just wouldn't do it myself that way. Okay, any questions on that? So the work that I just showed you by hand first, kind of looking at the graph, was the important points where there's a gap. Every other point there wasn't a gap, so I didn't really care about them because I just go look at the graph and see what the y value is at those points. But the gap points were important. One was just fine, and the other one was a does not exist. So I need to identify that before I start just running rampant and starting to plug things in. It doesn't matter the limit. 1 point doesn't matter for the limit. Let me see if I wrote that here. I didn't write it, but it's only 1 point. It's like that 1 point being away doesn't matter. Think of it as an outlier or something. Everything else matched up, and it was that one measurement that just was away from it. It wasn't a big deal. Good? These are super easy too. Hey, was I being too nice to you this week? I think I'm being too nice. No. Evaluate the limit using the appropriate limit laws. If there's no problem, no piecewise, no denominator crazy thing, that's why they asked you those domain questions. My son showed me on MathWeb, you can tell it to find the domain of the function. It's like, I looked at that and think, why are we teaching 50 of these problems anymore? That it's outdated now. Okay, so you look at difference of squares you need to know, difference of cubes you kind of need to know. But finding the domain of a function, if a computer can do that, why not? Go to the computer. No issues here. -1, I can just plug it right in. So -1 is what I plug in because I circled it. That's why I'm plugging in -1. Because someone will ask me on Wednesday why I plugged in -1. That's why. Because the x is sliding over to -1. What's the y value sliding to? That's the question. Well, I plug -1 in there and just see. And it's 7. And look at that. It matched up webassign. You know I'm mistake prone, so I make these jokes, but you know, sometimes I make mistakes, but the nice thing is I can put a little lasso around it and cut it out of the slides and then redo it and then fake in here like I was perfect all the time. All right, I thought at first because I don't like to see square roots of the rational function, but they're purposely trying to trip you up. It's fine. At x equals 2, there's no 0 in the denominator. Right? I can plug 2 in here. Nothing wrong with it. So just plug in, no worries, just plug in the 2. I get 3/2. Good? All right, I saw this problem and I thought, should I give this to them? It's the math side of me. So students will write things like this. They'll write this is equal to this because what the student did is they factored the top part and then they canceled the x minus 3's. See, if you factor the top part, it factors like this, and you can cancel the x minus 3 and you get x plus 4 as your answer. These two things are not equal. You asked about the whole. There's a whole right at x equals 3 because I can't plug in x equals 3. And if you graph it on your calculator, it won't show you that whole because it's just connecting the dots. So I had a German girl that I taught with at Georgia Tech when I first got there. Every time the student wrote something like this, and Georgia Tech exams were nasty. They had like tons of problems on them. So every time the student left out the limit, she marked it wrong. They're not the same. They got it completely wrong. They're not the same. That German Has to be precise. So that's, I just wanted to show it to you because not putting that limb there makes a difference. You have to put the word limb there to cover your but. You thought I was going to say something else. I didn't. Boy, look at that. If I say but, you laugh. But. I asked my girls that. Why if anybody says the word but, why are butts funny? They always say butts are funny. They're not equal. So canceling means that I'm assuming x is not equal to 3. That's why that one's incorrect. And limits do not consider a single point. That's what your question was, that single point doesn't count. So I don't have to worry about the value at 3 itself. It's okay. And that's why covering with a limit covers your butt. This was a trick question. I looked at it and went, I don't know what the minus sign is not showing up. They wanted a minus sign. They had a minus sign on mine. So that one I could plug in. Let's see. So I get -2. Because as long as you can plug it in, just go ahead and plug it in. Here's one where you can't plug it in. You want to plug in 5. I can't plug in 5 because it makes my denominator 0. So therefore, I need to factor. Those two things are not the same. When, I just factored it. FOIL, Mr. Smiley. See Mr. Smiley? 2 eyes, nose, mouth. So I just checked my work, but I kind of didn't. I already knew that there has to be an x minus 5 because it's a webassign problem that never happens in real life, and they can't cancel out. Real life expressions, like without data, are always nasty. So those cancel, and I didn't get I shouldn't wrote equals. It's after I cancel, I get x divided by x plus 1. But I cover my butt by just doing this arrow business. So I don't want to write limb, 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 limb on everything that I have. So what I do is I do the algebra first, and I put a little arrow there. So the arrow says, as x goes to 5, my y value, I just put 2 arrows. And that covers my butt. That's right. It's I'll tell my little girls that it's normal for even adults to laugh at the word butt. They're not allowed to say it in class. I told my daughter I'm going to say it in class. She's like, I'm not allowed to say it at school. It's considered a bad word.